Hi everyone, I'm Alan Messick, a judge and with the Rabbit Show, and today we're judging the Coronavirus International Rabbit Show, where we've been doing this for the last few days. It's been getting a lot of good vibes, around the world because we're all kind of stuck at home these days. It's a Sunday. We normally would be at Rabbit Shows this weekend. In fact, this weekend I would be in Jonesboro, Arkansas, which just had a tornado kind of devastate the town yesterday. It's very sad. So we actually would have been in Jonesboro, Arkansas yesterday. So the world's kind of a crazy place right now. So to kind of boost our spirits, David Mole and his group with the Ohio, Michigan State Line Club have put together this really cool show, brought judges from around the world together to judge rabbits. And we've been doing video, we've been doing some comments, but today we're going to mix it live right now and go through some slides on these youth Dutch. So bear with us. This is the first time we've done it. Apologies if it gets a little disorganized, but I've already kind of pre-sorted the photos, and I'm going to go through and turn the phone around so that you guys look at the screen as we go through the youth Dutch judging in the international show. So thanks to everyone who's participated, who's watched along and joined in, probably watched along and on your own too. So maybe there's some educational value, which we of course love doing that, David and I, and the rest of us. So anyway, let's get to youth Dutch. We're going to start with blacks. I'm going to turn the phone around and you're going to watch the screen now. We're going to start with blacks in the senior bucks class. So we have 4 black senior bucks competing, and we're going to start the class with this buck, WC 61. And he's going to go 4th, so 4th out of 4 because he's a little bit longer in style to his body. Body is an important aspect in the Dutch breed, but markings are even more important. And markings are what I'm going to fault him on. His saddle's a little bit longer. He's got quite a bit of feathering up here towards his saddle. Attempts at a hairline, but you can see this area right here at the top of the blaze where it gets really blunt. And undercut's a little bit wavy. Okay, 3rd place in the class is DR5. Longer in type, probably a finer boned buck. So type works against him in this regard in this class. He has a good undercut. Stops look appropriate in length, though they're a little bit biased on the left side. Blaze looks appropriate in terms of shape and transition. Can't really see what's going on with his cheeks too well. Maybe they appear a little square over here, but not a good photo to judge that on. 2nd in the class of black senior bucks is PB3. He's got a good depth in his shoulder, but he peaks sooner and then kind of slides off in his rear. Undercut's clean and uniform. Stops are uniform, but a little bit longer. Blaze looks good. Cheeks are asymmetrical, with one cheek being a little lower than the other. That left cheek probably is his strongest. You can see right here. It's nicely rounded around the whisker bed. He has a good saddle. That looks like a good buck. So he's number 2. And then our class-winning buck, I don't have a lot of photos of him, but I think he exemplifies a good example of a Dutch senior buck. That's a buck that's masculine. He's got a nicely shaped head. He peaks nicely. He's a little bit long about his front, but a good turn and depth and roundness over his top line. He has a clean saddle. Stops appear correct in length. I'd like to see him underneath. Again, these judgings via photo are a new challenge for us, and we have to use a little bit of maybe psychic abilities to decide what's going on underneath. But anyway, that's our class. Senior bucks. There were 4 competing. We are now going to move on to black senior does, and there are 5 competing. 5th place is going to go to a doe named S1. She's longer in style to her body. She's finer in bone. She's not as robust as the doe that's going to take the class. Saddle gets a little bit wavy here. She's kind of got a lower cheek. Blaze is less transitional. It kind of gets a little off here. It needs to be more gradual. S, our 4th place doe. She has a short body, good depth in her front end, but she peaks sooner and kind of slides off. She has a more angular head. It needs to be a little rounder in her cheeks, and that would help accentuate her cheek marking as well. Stops appear to have good uniformity in length, but can't really see if any of them are biased or not. This is going to be our 3rd place doe, CHC2. She's the finest bone doe in the class, really evident here in the shape of her head, the diameter of her forelimb, but she's got some good things about her in terms of markings. Good saddle, stops are nearly uniform. She has a very, very round cheek, just caresses the whisker bed. Good saddle. So she's a nicely marked doe, but type keeps her from going far. 47 is a second place doe. She's got a good body, maybe the best body in the class. Deep, peaks nicely, probably transitions well on her sidelines. She has a good saddle towards the top, but it's transitional. Good undercut, stops up here appropriate in length. We can't touch these rabbits, but she looks like she would be a longer coated, coarser doe in terms of texture. Class winning doe is M10. So this is first place in our class of 5 black senior does. She's a really nicely presented doe, beautifully marked. It's clean. I would say her weakest marking happens to be her blaze, where it's not as transitional between her eyes to the base of her ear, but really nicely done underneath. Very clean undercut, uniform stops, and a really glossy, healthy coat. So that's our best in the class of 5 black senior does. Moving on to junior does in the blacks, we have 2. Second is Tattoo K, and she's short. She appears to have a good top line, maybe peaking a little bit sooner up here. Her stops are long. They're also biased on the left side. Blaze isn't as transitional right here over her or around her nose into her whisker. Number 2. Class winning junior doe is R18. Short, compact. Does peak too soon. She kind of slides off right here past the midsection of her body. But she's to be admired about her sidelines. She's transitional from her shoulder into her midsection, into her hips. This is a great view from the top. You can appreciate how round she is in her body and her hips. Nicely shaped blaze. Undercut looks good. Stop, or the cheek maybe gets a bit square right here. In the blacks, we are going to use the first place as best opposite sex of variety. Best of variety in the blacks goes to that senior doe. A lot of things together in both type and markings, and those are really important aspects, of course, of the Dutch breed. So she is best of variety, and she'll go on to compete in a little bit for best of breed. Next, we're going to look at 3 blue senior bucks. Third place is R5. He's kind of lower about his front end, brings some depth to his mid, maybe a longer style buck in type. Underneath, when you look at the undercut, that's the marking that extends to the underside of the body. He's got kind of an off spot there. He's not as smooth in his sidelines. He maybe is a little bit finer in bone too. That's why his head is not as broad. He's not as masculine for a senior buck. Second is Max. He brings a little more masculinity, a little more jaw strength and head shape and stockiness to his ears. He's got a very nicely shaped blade. Undercut's clean. He tends to be longer and lower in body. He has better bone than third, but still a similar body style to the third place buck. The class-winning blue buck in the senior class is MD32. I think he's an easy winner. He's short, compact, he's natural. This is a photo you don't see a lot of hands in, because whoever took the photo or whoever owns the rabbit doesn't need to do a lot of manipulation, because the buck has good type. He sits really nicely, shows a compact body type with a good high point, rounds well over the hips. Oops. And then he's nicely marked. Saddle, stops, very nicely shaped blaze. It's transitional over the whisker bed between his eyes up until the base of his ear. He also appears to have good blue color, maybe on the course. Again, we can't touch them, so texture and things like that are not to be really considered in online judging. 3 blue senior does competing. Third place will be at JTK. Now, this photo honestly looks steel to me, but I don't have proof of that. The rabbit's not in front of me, so she's going to go third. She also doesn't really exemplify some of the traits that the winning doe in this class has. She's finer in bone, a little bit longer about her body, nicely marked in terms of saddle. Undercut is a little has kind of a wiggle right there. Appear uniform, but they're long. Second is WC63. She's a longer style doe in body, and that's where I'm going to knock her compared to the class-winning doe. She has some decent markings. Stops appear uniform. She's got a clean undercut, a good saddle. Cheeks get a little square towards the lower part of her whisker bed. And she's got a kind of an odd blaze right there. But good color, probably a short-coated doe, which is ideal for a flyback breed. Class-winning doe in the blue senior does is WC64. She's a little more tied together in her body. little shorter, a little better depth over her top line. This photo right here really shows her body off really nicely. And again, a photo you don't see a lot of hands in because she's just kind of doing her own thing. She grows nicely in terms of the, where the bones are supposed to be. She turns nicely, good shape to her lower. From the back, I like this photo a lot. It exemplifies, how to judge lower hindquarters appear a little narrower in her lower body. Next class in the blues, we have 2 junior bucks. Second is going to be an MD, short and compact. He's got kind of that longer head right now. He's probably going through a transitional stage, like that rabbit puberty stage where things are just not as proportioned as they will be when he gets older. But, we judge rabbits whether it's virtual or in person for face value. And today in the photo, he appears to have kind of a longer shaped head. But still a short, compact body, clean saddle, nicely shaped cheek, rounds well into the whisker bed. And then our class winning buck, this is a good class, by the way. These were both high quality bucks. MC99 is our class winning junior buck. Not as short and compact in his shoulder and front end as that second place buck, but he's more masculine in head and ear, a little more tied together in body, maybe on his lower sidelines. And he's really nicely marked. Saddle, stops are clean, asymmetrical in terms of proportion of one to the other, but nonetheless they're clean. Nicely shaped on his profile side. So that was our first place junior buck in the blues. Moving on to the last class of blue Dutch in our youth show are 3 junior does. Third goes to a doe named Brit. She tends to be longer in body. This is a rabbit that I'm confident saying that she's got kind of a longer fur. You can see this kind of protruding over the body, so the coat doesn't lie as flat. And that works against Dutch because a shorter coated, better coated in terms of texture Dutch will tend to show markings that are crisper, and her markings are not as crisp. You look at underneath, look at over the top. That's the fur really gets kind of in the way. Blaze gets nicely shaped between her eyes, but less transitional, probably square around her lower jawline and head. Second is an MH913. Nicely marked doe underneath. Very clean, appropriately placed undercut. She has a good saddle from the top. Her body maybe is a little bit longer than the class-winning doe we're going to see in a second, and so too are her stops right here. They tend to be uniform in length. One has a little bit of a wiggle, and they are ultimately too long for stops, which should take up 1/3 of the shape of the hawk. Class-winning blue junior doe is C98. She's a good doe. She's compact. She's rather round. She could use maybe a little more depth over the top of her hip, but comes off from the base of her ear nicely into her hips. Clean saddle. Probably her weakest marking is her blaze. She needs to come up a little bit smoother from her eye to the base of her ear. Nicely made underneath with a good undercut. Stops are uniform. Maybe on the longer side, but really by not too much. And a nicely coated doe. The markings and the coat lies flat against her body. The guards don't protrude up, so that helps to show off her markings quite well. In the blue variety, we'll pick variety. Now, I'm going to use the senior buck as the winner, and that is this guy right here. MD32 is best of variety blue Dutch in the youth show in the coronavirus virtual international rabbit show. So MD32 is our blue senior buck going on to win best of variety. And then we just looked at that junior doe, she is going to be best opposite sex of variety. So best of variety senior buck, best opposite sex of variety, the blue junior doe, MC98. And then we're going to move on to our next variety, which is chocolate. We have 2 senior does competing. This was a tough class. Both does could both use a little bit of something. BEA is second. She has a good profile. She's round, she's deep, but I really cannot assess too much of her because we don't have any shots of her underneath, so I can't look at her undercut, can't look at her stops. She does have a good blaze. Cheeks maybe are a little lower, but it'd be good to see cheeks from a profile side. Dutch have a lot going on. You really look at them from all angles. So to photograph Dutch for a virtual show would take work. You'd have to really look at them from all angles and get both sides, because just because a cheek is doing one thing and roundness on one side doesn't mean it's doing the same thing on the opposite side. It could be low and square. So to really Dutch correctly, you got to take a lot of photos. So it's unfortunate that I can't judge more of her because there's just not a lot to look for. The class winning doe is going to be MD42. I have more photos to look at, and that's why she ultimately wins. I feel like I'm more confident in placing her. But with that said, she's got kind of longer stops, a little bit longer front end. She peaks sooner. She's fairly round from the profile side. Color looks washed out. It's often chocolate Dutch. One chocolate junior doe competing. She's really good, and she's going to win best of variety while we're at it. We're going to announce that. So MD44 is first place. Chocolate junior. She's also best of variety, and she's really rich in color too. That's oftentimes chocolate Dutch can be. They can be like Havana chocolates, really rich. Anyway, she's short and compact. Peaks a little soon in terms of her top line. Undercut's got a little bit of wiggle. Well, it's interesting that up here she looks great. She's got a little bit of an odd spot right here, but stops appear appropriate in length and uniformity. Nicely shaped head. She's got some breed character to her. So that's our best of variety chocolate. That's the junior doe. Moving on to grays. There are 3 senior bucks competing in the youth show for gray. Third goes to DLB26. He's a longer type buck. Longer, flatter body. He's got a longer head. He needs to have more robustness or width over his muzzle to give him some more roundness. And if he had a rounder shaped head, that would also help accentuate his cheek markings and also kind of push out his blaze to make it a little more transitional. Hard to gauge color. He appears dark from this side, but without blowing into the coat, I can't assess the agouti banding and the proportion down the hair shaft of where the lie. Second place in the gray senior bucks is FL9. He chooses kind of a longer style buck right through here through his shoulder. Appears to peak nicely over the. He's very streamlined in his sidelines. He needs to taper a little bit more front to back and width of body. He has a better head than our third place buck. He's more of a senior buck grade, which would be like a broad, wider head. He's good blaze. You know, with gray Dutch, we assess their undercut by blowing into the fur. Agouti rabbits will have, of course, white bellies and then a dark slate undercolor. So we judge undercuts in gray by blowing into the coat. Of course, I can't do that, so I have no idea what's going on here with the with the undercut on this gray Dutch. But he appears to have better surface color than our third place buck. Class winning buck is CR29 in the gray senior buck class. Photos are a little blurry, but you know, sometimes the best way to look at a Dutch is to step back and kind of blur your eyes, and that helps to look candidly at the markings. So you know, these photos are blurry, but I can still see the size and the markings. He's got a very good saddle. To have round cheeks. He's got a good blaze. Look at him from over the top. He's got a clean saddle. Stops appear long and asymmetrical, with the right stop being longer than the left. And he also appears to be the best colored. And I keep saying that, but the tone of the overall color appears brighter. That's due to the intensity and the width of the intermediate band, because these are agouti rabbits, so that intermediate band will be like a straw color. It's the same color that we see in chestnuts and other similar, like sandy Flemish. So anyway, you want that intermediate band to be kind of a straw bright color, and that will help to make the surface color better. So, and he certainly appears that way. So CR29 is first place in the gray senior bucks. Moving on to gray senior does. There are 6. This is actually the biggest class of youth Dutch competing, so hats off to everyone who participated in this class. It was a competitive one. 6th place goes to doe named 14. She's got a good shoulder, but she plateaus right there in the middle of her body. She's got kind of an odd. Her blaze is not very transitional. It starts off well, but then it gets really narrow quickly. Again, gray Dutch we assess by blowing into the coat, and we can't do that here, so I don't know what's going on there. Stops up here maybe a little longer. This is a good photo to look at her lower hindquarter. You can see that her hocks kind of kick out. That's because she's base doe. Her lower hindquarter is probably pinched, and that's why her hocks kick out naturally. So a really wonderful photo to assess that on. So hats off to the exhibitor for showing us that. 5th is Abby. Another doe, maybe finer in bone. She's darker in color. She does appear to have good fur. The coat lies flat against the body. There appears to be some luster there. In terms of marking, she's got longer stops, a decent saddle in terms of placement. Blaze probably looks okay, but the cheeks are square on both sides. Next in the class, it's going to be our 4th place, is P3RL. probably the weakest type doe in of the middle and top class. She's kind of longer and lower, but she's well marked, and that's what's brought her up to the top. She's got a good saddle, especially from this angle. Stops appear length, maybe kicked out a little bit on the left side in terms of bias. She appears also darker in color, but another doe that appears to have a shorter flyback coat, which will help her accentuate her markings. Third place in our gray senior doe class in the youth Dutch, R2, R1. Looks like she's got good length of body, turns nicely over her top line. Kind of a longer saddle doe. Sorry, I keep doing that. Longer saddle doe. Good shot of her rear. She is very full to the table. So if you were to get your hands on her, you would imagine that she should carry good uniformity and taper down her sidelines. A good blaze. Second place is a PME8. She's going to be second and not first based on type. Markings have brought her up this. She's got a lot of roundness to her cheeks. Saddle looks good. Stops are long, but the uniform also appearing to be a better color doe. But she's finer in bone and also lower in her front end. That's what's going to keep her at second. Class winning doe is PW1. So class winning gray senior doe, that is PW1. Kind of a gray a grainier picture, harder to see really crisp things about it. But again, these are Dutch. Sometimes the best view is to kind of blur your eyes and step back. And the picture is doing that for us. She's short, she's compact, she appears to have good cheeks. This is a great photo, again, to see that Dutch have symmetry or should have symmetry from side to side. So just because one cheek is round doesn't mean the opposite is round. This photo, the exhibitor did a great job at showing us both sides of this Dutch. So we can actually confidently say that this cheek and this cheek are both round. They both are placed nearly the same, and that's great. Those are big points for Dutch. A good saddle. Stops appear appropriate in length. Color looks dark, but hard to really assess color, as we say, especially in these agoutis where you really prefer to blow into the coat to assess the rings and the banding. There's one gray junior doe competing. She appears flatter in type. She peaks right there past her shoulder and kind of slopes off into her rear. Blaze gets a little blunt just at the very tip if we're going to be super critical. Oops. Stops. They've got a little wiggle to them. They're uniform in symmetry. She's a younger doe with a little more cream-colored belly, so it's easier to see her undercut at this point, which also appears uniform. In our grays, we can pick best of variety now. The first place senior doe that we just looked at, PW1, she's going to be the variety winner. So best gray youth Dutch is PW1. Best opposite sex is the senior buck, CR29. And his stops are a little longer, and he could use a little more maybe masculinity to his head. Those things kept him from taking the variety, and ultimately the doe wins. Next, we're going to look at our steals. Yeah, there are two steel senior bucks competing. MH3 will be second. He's kind of an easy buck to put second. He's really flat and long in type. He's got some issues with his markings right here over his blaze. Cut appears skewed. He does have clean stops, probably very symmetrical. Hats off to the exhibitor for showing us the top and a good view of both stops. While they're clean, they just tend to be longer than ideal. Maybe his best attribute is his color. He appears to have good ticking that's uniform over the top of his body. Class-winning steel senior buck on the Youth Dutch show is 5C1. Shorter, compact, better body compared to the buck we just looked at. He has a couple marking issues right here in his blaze. He gets too blunt towards the tip. He has breed character about his ears. They're stocky and well-furred. Has a better head, so he's a little buckier. Undercut appears clean. When you look at his rear and where his placement of back hocks are, they're closer together, so he's probably a buck that is narrower. If you got your hands on, your hands would taper from the top of the body down to the table. And that's evident, too, in this photo, this top left photo, where he kicks out his hock on the left side because he's standing on a narrower base. Nonetheless, he's got a little more going for him than our second place buck, so that's why he's first. There are steel senior does in the Youth Dutch show. AF21 is third. She's flatter in type. She reminds me of the second place, kind of longer, flatter, finer boned. She has a clean saddle, good color. Color, again, is probably her best attribute. This is a great photo to look at stops and some. I can't see if she's split stop, but this would be an indication that she's pretty to being that. R10 is second in the senior does and our steels. She's shorter, more compact in type. Peaks a little sooner, a little flatter over her top. She's got an issue right here with her undercut. It needs to be straighter and more in line with her body. Saddle looks good from the profile side, or from the top view, I should say. And then class winning senior doe is AF1. Deeper bodied, maybe a little longer and lower about her shoulder, but she brings more depth to her hips. A clean saddle, great color. There's some uniformity and ticking. Stops, good photo to assess the uniformity. They both maybe appear a little longer, but they're uniform. Undercut, maybe her weakest marking. It needs to be a little straighter. And then we have one steel junior buck. This is the last steel competing, and this is a really high quality buck. In fact, he needs some competition because he's got a lot going for him. So one steel junior buck competing in the Youth Dutch Show. He is short, he's compact, he's got a great head. Look at his cheeks, they're really, really round from the profile side. He probably has the best cheeks in of the Dutch we've looked at so far. This is a really good example of a round cheek, just kind of hovers or caresses the whisker bed and then comes back around. You know, they say if you judge Dutch, imagine lots of circles, and this would be a circle. If you took like a softball and placed it over, it would make a perfect round shadow over that cheek marking. He's got a good saddle. He's got a great blaze, helped again by the roundness of the cheeks. That often gets a blaze off to a good start by having good cheeks, and that helps the blaze transition well. He's got a clean undercut. Stops appear appropriate in length. They're super uniform. Look at that. That's one straight line over the top. And he appears to have good ticking. It's a little heavier, but it's uniform over his back. Is a great example of the Dutch breed, and of course steel. He's going to be best of variety. I'm going to announce that right now. Best steel in the Youth Dutch Show is SBK RIP. And we're going to use, were there any does? Yeah, senior doe. Senior doe, AF1 is going to be best opposite sex of variety in the steels. Okay, but the junior buck, the variety. We're going to move on to two more varieties. That's Tort. There are 3 senior bucks competing. Third is an A07M1. He's kind of longer, flatter in type. He needs to be more tied together. This breed has compact body type, and which means they're short, and this guy's just too long. Probably has a decent... Due to the angles of the photo, it's hard to really assess. FDR is second. Shorter, more compact in type, better profile. He needs more head shape. He tends to be more juvenile or junior-esque about the shape and width of his jawline. Blaze has kind of a little bit of a wiggle past his eye. Ears are off in proportion, but they appear stocky and well-furred. Color looks dark. Blaze is narrow because the cheek on the left side is square and low and almost hooks right here into his cheek. Stops are uniform. That's probably his best marking, though they may be on the long side. Number 1 is EM5. A little shorter and more compact. Definitely has a better head shape and size. More buck-like. Color is also brighter. The torts should not be dark. This should be a kind of a richer color, and he has a better example of that color. Markings are good on his blaze. Saddle's a little bit feathered. Good view from the rear, so you can appreciate that he's wide in his lower hips. We have one Tort junior doe competing, and I do not think she's Tort. I think that she's actually, no, she's not Tort. She's like a smutty orange or maybe fox. I don't know. We can't really look at her in person, so we'll give her some comments on type and markings, but she's not going to go any farther today. She does have some longer stops, kind of a longer face, narrower blaze, undercut. I don't know what's going on with that because of the wideband version of her color. Okay, so that makes our best of variety and the Torts, the senior buck. This guy right here. EM5 is best of variety Tort in our International Youth Dutch Show. And we have one more Dutch to look at because this is an international show. We're going to look at a variety that's not recognized in the U.S., but that's perfectly fine for this non-sanctioned show, and that's yellow. Yellow is a color that we see in Europe, and we're going to see more of it here, but we're calling it gold. Anyway, it's not recognized, but we're still going to judge and pretend like it is. So this is Junior Doe. she's often her breed character. She's long, she's low, flat, kind of fine boned, narrower blazed, a very short saddle, or should I say long saddle. She's got a shorter shoulder. Her neck marking bleeds into her shoulder, so she doesn't have the roundness of markings. Okay, so that concludes all of our varieties for the Youth Dutch Show and the Coronavirus International Virtual Rabbit Show. We're going to pick best of breed now, and I'm just going to kind of skim through some of our top photos. So best opposite sex in black was a senior buck. Best of variety black was a senior doe. In blue, best of variety was no, that's a black. Blue is a senior buck. Really good example of him. And then opposite sex of variety was a junior doe. By the way, I have Kate, ARBA Judge 1000 behind me. She's clerking for me and keeping my score, so appreciate her being here. This made it a lot easier. And Kate, you said that was a junior doe, right?
Mm-hmm. MC98.
Yeah, here she is. That was best opposite sex of variety was the blue junior doe. We said the senior buck was best of variety.
Chocolate junior doe.
In chocolates, best of variety was the junior doe. And opposite was, we didn't have one, did we? No, there were no bucks competing in chocolate. So best was the junior doe. Next variety we judged was gray, and the winner was senior doe. So that was best of variety gray in the Youth Dutch. She is going to be the best of variety, and we're going to use CR29, that's senior buck, as best opposite sex of variety. And moving on to the last two varieties we judged, Steel and Tort. We had one really awesome junior buck competing, if you remember. He was best of variety, SBK RIP. That was best of variety Steel. And the senior doe was best opposite sex of variety AF1. Okay, so she's best opposite sex Steel. Best of variety Steel was this junior buck. And in the torts, we had best of variety going to the senior buck. And we did not pick an opposite because I don't think that the doe competing actually was tort. So EM5 is the tort senior buck. He was best of variety. All right, best opposite sex of breed is between two does. And we'll go look at them really quickly. That's going to be our black doe here. Take a look at her. She's a senior doe. She's short. She's compact. She's nicely marked. Probably a doe, if we got our hands on her, she would have a good coat, and that's what's helping to accentuate her marking. She's got a flat coat, shorter, finer guard hair, which helps to make her look trimmer. And then another top doe was the blue doe. No. Right here. Yeah. And that was a senior doe. She was opposite. No, I lied.
32. Or, sorry.
Yeah, right here.
MC98.
MC98. That was our best opposite sex blue. So that doe and the black doe are in contention for best sex of breed, because I am going to use a buck for best of breed. Anyone kind of guess what it is? The black doe, by the way, is going to be best opposite sex of breed, and that is MC10 or M10. Sorry, that's best opposite sex of breed Dutch in the youth show, and then best of breed. It was really easy. This is a really awesome little buck, of course. That is no, that's not him. Where am I going? Right here. This is best of breed in the Youth Dutch Show and the Coronavirus Virtual International Rabbit Show. That's a Steel junior buck. He puts a lot of stuff together, both in markings and type. He's short and compact. If you are learning about Dutch and want to learn about roundness of cheeks, this guy really nails it. He's got a great blaze, appears to have good and uniformity. Maybe it's a little bit heavier, but it's uniform. Super set of stops and undercut. It's too bad we don't have rabbit shows right now, because he would be one that would be burning up the table. So congratulations to this Steel junior buck for winning best in the Youth Dutch Show. Best opposite sex again is the black senior doe. Guys, thank you very much for watching. That went a lot better than I thought it was going to go. A little prejudging and looking at photos definitely helped out. So thanks for tuning in.